Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Appreciate you guys coming back and checking it out. We got something pretty special for you today. We have the story of the Bigfoot type creatures over in Vietnam during the Vietnam War. Actually, one of the hills that the Marines were on was named Monkey Mountain because of so many sightings of this creature over there. Now, once again, some people think that Bigfoot here in America traveled across the Bering Land Bridge and emigrated over here, and then there are others that think that Bigfoot evolved here and emigrated over to Asia. So depending on what you believe with that, this kind of relates to that as far as, this creature over there in Asia. Now you guys decide which way you guys think it happened. Did they evolve in Asia and came over this way, or vice versa? They evolved in America and went over that way, over the land bridge. You guys make up your own mind. I'm not going to tell you what to believe. Now with this video, what we got, I've got a couple small audio clips of a few soldiers that are talking about their encounters with this. I also have some written accounts that I'm going to read to you. And as always, you know how WILLSTAR does it. I'm going to be showing you with Google Earth these locations. These locations over in Vietnam are still to this day super jungly. It's really remote and hard to get to. Not very many people go into that area. So without further ado, let's get into this one. Stories of the Batatut actually predate the Vietnam War. Regional variants from Laos and Borneo have added to the Batatut mythos for decades, but many more are shared within the Vu Quang Nature Reserve. The people who live there call the creature Batatut, loosely translated as jungle people. When standing upright, anecdotal evidence places the Batatut at around 6 feet tall, a hairy, ape-like beast not unlike Bigfoot, more familiar to North America. The Batatut range in ferocity depending on regional legend, with the most aggressive variants found in Borneo. The first recorded sighting of the Batatut was in 1918, but it wasn't until war raised the jungle habitats that stories of the Batatut's rage became more popular. The locals of these regions consider these creatures to be merely a fact of life, but the Batatut was not really known to the outside world until war began to impede into their domain. While rock apes, or Batatuts, as they are called in Vietnam, are nowhere near as well known as the cryptids like Bigfoot, sightings of these mysterious creatures by American troops in the jungles of Vietnam throughout the course of the Vietnam War were surprisingly numerous.
We really didn't know what it was. It sounded like the North Vietnamese were attacking us with tanks. I had heard that there had been previous problems with what we called rock apes, and in fact, at one point, a band of them threw one Marine off the rock pile. And so we were wary of them, without a doubt. This animal was stockier. He was of darker color, a lot more muscular. This different creature would, early in the morning, burst out of the jungle into a clearing and just rail at us, just yell and scream and shake his fists. And it was very human behavior, and it was real obvious that he took exception to our presence there.
With many witnesses giving extremely detailed accounts of the sightings. One particular hill in Vietnam was the site of so many rock ape sightings that it became known as Monkey Mountain. While no corpses of these strange creatures were ever recovered or any clear pictures taken of them, the fact that sightings of them were so widespread and common throughout the war makes them worthy of at least an investigation. Rock apes were so named because of their supposed propensity for throwing rocks, usually in retaliation though, after rocks were thrown at them first. They were also said to toss grenades hurled their way back at the throwers on occasion. Described as being up to 6 feet tall and strongly built, with long limbs and protruding stomachs, the rock apes, or Batatuts, were said to be witnessed to be covered in brown or reddish-brown hair. They were also thought to live in troops, rather than living a solitary existence, and their habitat was confined to remote areas of the jungle, far from human habitation, areas that the Vietnam War opened up. At first, the description of these creatures seemed to point to the fact that may have simply been misidentified orangutans. But while orangutans once did inhabit Vietnam, they became extinct there thousands of years ago. Also, much of what troops in Vietnam reported about the rock apes doesn't really match typical orangutan behavior. While orangutans are sometimes social animals, they spend far more time foraging alone. Sightings of the rock apes by Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese troops were also common enough that a North Vietnamese general, General Hong Minh Tha, organized an expedition in 1974 to try to capture or at least kill one of these legendary creatures. The expedition was unsuccessful though, and no hard evidence for the existence of the rock apes was found. Something quite striking about the many sightings of the rock apes reported by American troops is the fact that these creatures showed little to no fear of humans. They displayed this trait to such an extent that startled troops out on patrol in the jungle would often happen on rock apes at distances of a few yards, often getting quite a fright as they thought they had just come across an enemy patrol, rather than a troop of monkeys or a group of apes. This apparent lack of fear of humans could be explained by the fact that rock apes inhabited ranges that were usually so far away from humans that they saw them as no threat, or if reports that their large size were accurate, that they saw human beings as too small or weak to present a significant threat to them. On at least one occasion, in fact, a large troop of rock apes was said to have attacked a group of Marines en masse. Okay, this quick report is by soldier Alfonso Villarreal. Now, he tells a quick story about when he had an encounter with these rock apes. So let's get to this right here. He was with his platoon and it was nighttime. Off in the distance, he and his comrades saw what looked like a large medicine ball moving towards them through a ravine. The object kept moving towards them until it was right up on the end of a rifle. The Marine tapped the thing with his rifle, and the thing started screaming, yelling, waving its arms all over and running away. It was a baby rock ape, the soldier said. Rock apes are indigenous to Vietnam's hills and rocky areas. Then on top of the steep sides of the ravine came large boulders. Some may be weighing 300 to 400 pounds. The boulders were coming from the rock apes' adults. Later, the adult apes were coming down the path towards the platoon. They were dauntless. The soldier says they were like gorillas, and they had 4 to 5 inch fangs. We had to shoot them. I think there were about 17 of them. The little rock ape was not among the dead rock apes. I've never seen anything like it, he said. And here is a story from a 101st Airborne soldier. It was a hot day. The 6 men from the 101st Airborne Division were taking a little break in the middle of the mountainous jungle when the event took place. They had been carrying 100-pound equipment under the unforgiving sun in a mosquito-infested environment, full of unfamiliar sounds and views that were nothing like the American soldiers were used to in their native land. Despite the momentary resting time, they kept their 5 senses on, for they were aware that the Viet Cong could have very well tracked them, something the natives were exceedingly good at. Suddenly, according to the men, a few small trees located 15 yards uphill began clearly shaking. The soldiers had trained for this, and as they got ready for combat to fight the expected Viet Cong soldiers jump out of the bushes, they never imagined what they saw next. A long, oblong-shaped head showed up. The face, the soldier said, was covered in red hair with a pair of dark eyes and huge mouth. The creature then stepped out of the vegetation into the clearing, allowing the group to observe the rest of its muscular body, which was also featured by the same type of red hair. The cryptid wasn't taller than 5 feet, and it walked upright. It stopped, looked at them as though scrutinizing each one of the soldiers. "What the hell is that?" one of the soldiers recalls muttering. "It's a rock ape," said another. "No, it ain't," a third man said. "I've seen rock apes, and that sure as hell isn't a rock ape." The warriors didn't take their eyes off the creature. "It's an orangutan, isn't it?" asked the first soldier again. "Well, if it is, then he can't read a map. There are no orangutans in Vietnam."
We would go in, be inserted by helicopter. We were supposed to get in, find the enemy, and get out again without being spotted. The silence was everything. Concealment was important. Primarily, we communicated by hand signal. If we did talk, it was by whisper only, and we tried to avoid that. The second morning of our patrol, we were set up on a hillside. Behind us was a big patch of brush about 12 foot high. It was right after daylight. 2 of our guys were eating. The other 4 were pulling security. and all of a sudden we heard this commotion in the brush behind us. We all grabbed our weapons and turned around to face it, and suddenly the brush parted, and this creature stepped through this wall of brush. He was approximately 10 to 15 feet away, uphill from us, and he had his left arm grabbing a hold of the brush he had come through, and he looked down at us, and we froze. We didn't know what it was. It didn't make a sound. It just stood, it cocked its head a couple times as it was looking at us. Never changed the expression on its face at all. I'm guessing it was somewhere between 5'10" and 6 feet tall. It was had extremely long arms. It was straight-legged, no bow legs. The face and the hands had no hair on them. The face was as bare as my face is. And I remember the intelligence in the eyes was incredible. It was so human-like, it was unbelievable. We got to watch it for 7 to 10 seconds before it suddenly just turned around and walked back through the brush and disappeared. And to this day, we have no idea what that was.
Another account from 1968 describes an incident when his unit began hearing inexplicable noises along the outer perimeter of their camp late at night. Not knowing if they were hearing what was normal jungle life or the enemy, a corporal named Pancho took it upon himself to go out to investigate in the evening. Pancho determinedly marched up the hill to the communications bunker to see what was going on. When the corporal was on his way back, he was witnessed to let off several short bursts of fire from his weapon, before hurrying back to camp in somewhat unsettled, agitated state. Almost immediately, the unit's lieutenant had been on the radio demanding to know who was firing and at what. When Pancho reached the camp, he excitedly related that he had been walking back and noticed a bush that had not been there before. When he had leaned down to take a look, it had then allegedly snorted at him, causing him to panic and fire. What he had encountered was the ubiquitous rock ape of Vietnam. I would come to learn that they were nearly everywhere and quite fearless. In another encounter from 1969, a patrol was caught off guard by enemy fire, after which everyone took cover. It was then that something strange made his presence known to one of the group. As the witness was lying there avoiding getting shot, there was a figure that broke out of the thick vegetation, which at first seemed to be a large man. But as it ran past, it was clear this was something else altogether. The figure was described as being around 7 feet in height, impressively built, and mostly covered with reddish hair. Whatever it was moved extremely quickly, but was then caught by some bullets in the crossfire, after which it stumbled but didn't go down. It was then that the enemy began yelling something to each other excitedly that the witness could not understand before running off, and one of the enemy even leaving his weapons behind in a panic haste. The American patrol regrouped and headed to a more secure area, and that night they were assailed by a barrage of animalistic noises from the night, sounding like whines, barks, howls, and grunts. The next day, some of the patrol requested permission to go investigate what had been seen and heard the previous day, and as a search was underway, they came across an enemy soldier that seemed to have been viciously torn apart. The patrol was so disturbed by the gruesome sight that they ran back to their base by the hill. The rest of the time we were in Vietnam, I never heard the sounds or saw anything like it again. The talk of what we had seen spread very quickly, and some of the locals called it a name that I can neither pronounce or remember, but the translation, if I recall, was stench monkey or foul monkey, something like that. I can't remember for sure. What I do know is that it bothered me so much that I transferred from there to a job on a helicopter so that I wouldn't have to be in the jungle anymore. Another account given by Michael Kelly of the 502nd Division Infantry of the 101st Airborne describes not one rock ape, but hundreds of them. In the account in 1968, 8 of the strange creatures came casually walking up a trail on a ridge of Noi Mo Tao and surprised a platoon that was in the middle of having lunch when they turned a ridge about 10 meters from where the men were situated. According to Kelly, the platoon at first immediately thought they were Viet Cong, and all hell broke loose. The squad of men opened up with M16s and M75s and grenade launchers, lighting up the forest in a vicious display of booming firepower and flying pieces of vegetation. Kelly himself was at the far end of the clearing, about 50 meters from where the barrage of continuous shooting had started, and he grabbed a weapon to run to join along with the sergeant, taking cover under a toppled tree. For a few moments, Kelly and the platoon sergeant stayed hidden as the cacophony of gunfire erupted everywhere. When they finally gave each other the nod to engage, they popped out from behind the tree, ready to see a sizable enemy force descending upon them, judging by the non-stop barrage of relentless gunfire. What they saw instead was the platoon firing away at ghostly images that were swooshing through bushes and trees all around them. The mysterious intruders were described as being around 5.5 feet tall, and all but one was light brown to reddish brown in color. The other was almost black and was particularly aggressive large male, which reportedly madly rushed at men through the thick underbrush, snarling with teeth bared. Throughout the frightening encounter, the ape-like beast reportedly made sounds that sounded exactly like dogs barking. Then the creatures, whatever they were, abruptly melted away into the forest, disappearing as if they had never been there. When the surprised platoon regained their composure, they searched the bullet-riddled, gun-smoked, permeated area and found no sign of any dead bodies of the animals, and oddly, not even any fur or blood. This sort of mass congregation of rock apes was apparently not an isolated incident. In another shocking account, another platoon was also overrun by a large number of the creatures. In 1966, a highly strategic location known as Hill 868 in Quang Nam Province had allegedly been the site of a battle between Marines and a large group of rock apes. In the account, Marines operating in the area called their captain to report movement in the brush, which they believed to be a large force of Viet Cong headed their way. The captain then radioed back saying that they should stay in place and that no one was to fire in order not to give away their position. The patrol soon radioed back to say that it had turned out that it was not Viet Cong after all, but rather a large group of hairy bipedal humanoids all around them. The Marine patrol was commanded again not to open fire, but instead to throw rocks at the creatures to scare them away. This would prove to be unwise, as the rock apes then began hurling rocks back with great force, all the while screeching and growling all around them in the jungle, an estimated hundreds of them. Despite the assault of rocks and numerous requests for permission to open fire, the Marines were nevertheless told not to shoot, but rather to use bayonets instead. Shortly after, the captain could hear screeching and screams of pain from both Marines and ape alike over the radio, as well as a frantic message, "We're going hand to hand!" Shortly after that, the hill erupted in a roar of gunfire, screams, and screeching. When the captain sent men to go investigate, the war-torn area was found to be littered with injured men, as well as the bloodied bodies of several of the mysterious rock apes. No Marine had died, but several were seriously injured and had to be evacuated by helicopter. The battle became so infamous that it was called the Battle of Dong Den. Hill 868 became known among the men as being allegedly so infested with the rock apes that it was called Monkey Mountain. In 1968, members of Mike Company operating on Monkey Mountain apparently often came across plentiful physical evidence of the creatures there, such as droppings, tufts of hair, or footprints, as well as hearing their eerie barks and cries at night. And the rock apes even occasionally assaulted them with rocks lobbed from the jungle. These apes were described as throwing like girls but with velocity, and men were reported as being often seriously injured by the hurled stone projectiles. In one account, a veteran named Steve Canyon was out in the jungle of Monkey Mountain at night testing out a new muzzle flash and noise suppressor for their weapons. As they were setting up, they suddenly noticed a rock ape glaring at them from the thick vegetation, reportedly completely unafraid. After a few moments of staring at the soldiers, the creature was said to then let out a sound like the bark of a dog. One of the men threw a rock at it to scare it away and hit it dead on, after which the ape picked up a rock on its own and hurled it at them. It was then noticed that there were more of the rock apes gathering around in the jungle, around 20 of them, which all began screeching, howling, and throwing rocks at the frightened men in unison. Despite the threatening situation, the unit did not open fire, instead making a hasty retreat. When asked later why they had not shot the creatures, Canyon would later say, "I don't know, didn't seem right, but those apes started to come at us and we ran as fast as we could, and we didn't stop until we were out of the jungle." Alright, so there you guys go. A crazy video about Sasquatch slash Bigfoot creatures over in Asia, in Vietnam and those areas, Borneo. Man, I'll tell you what, these soldiers had enough to worry about without these rock apes, you know, trying to attack them and all that. That would be crazy. So I hope you guys really liked this video. If you did, make sure you hit that like button for me. Make sure you subscribe if you're new. There will be more and more videos like this coming out. And if you guys don't know, I'm really the only one out here on YouTube that shows you guys these locations of these Bigfoot encounters. So I don't think anybody else is really doing it like I do it. Hope you guys are enjoying it. Remember, until next time, where there is a WILLSTAR, there is a way. And we will talk to you guys later. Take care.